Jai Hind everyone. I am Achintya Pandey, Ajay Assistant Professor in the Department of Information Technology at AKGEC. Today I will explore the object-oriented programming concept, right? So, so objective is just exploring the concept of object-oriented programming. Means we will see what is object, what is classes, and all the concept behind basic object-oriented programming, like abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, function overloading, dynamic binding, and all that. At the end, we will I will show a program which is based on the object-oriented, which will representing the class and all that related to the object-oriented programming concept. Okay, so so first, what is object-oriented programming system? So object-oriented programming is basically it is the latest way of programming paradigm. Before object-oriented programming, procedural programming was used, like in C and Pascal language. The procedural programming was, was used. Okay, and today's programming, which is based on object-oriented, right? In fact, there are two types of object-oriented. One is object-based, and second one is the object-oriented. Okay, so object-oriented is the latest way of doing. Style of programming in which we treat everything or we think in terms of object. We closely related to the data, not the procedure and function. Okay, so before start of object-oriented programming, let's see the conventional programming which we used in C or Pascal. So what is procedure-oriented programming? So in procedure-oriented programming, sometimes it is called POP. There we fix there the main focus was to think about the procedure, to think about the functions. Suppose if a task is to be performed, so how we can divide the task into various sub-tasks and so on. Okay, so that was the method of procedure-oriented programming, right? So anything which we going to develop, so we would have to think in terms of procedure, that is a function. So in POP, the problem viewed as the sequence of things things to be done, such as reading, calculating, and printing. So primary focus was on the function. Like in C, it is function. In Pascal, it is called function was called procedure. So here problem is decomposed into tasks. Okay, like we can see in the diagram. Every C program is a collection of function. Okay, or function it is basically the procedure, right? So here we see the main program has been divided into 2-3 function. Further, these function could be divided or related at next level and so on. So this way of doing the things, dividing a task, a major task into sub-tasks and even sub-tasks into further sub-tasks and so on. So this top-down approach is called procedure-oriented, while we will see that object-oriented programming is a bottom-up approach. So it is not the top-down approach, it is the bottom-up approach. Okay, and in object-oriented programming, data is more secure. Rather, if you see in procedure-oriented or even in C programming, the data is freely available. It is not secure. Data is not wrapped. Okay, so data is more secured in the object-oriented. So further, if you continue to the POP, so here task is represented by instruction, action. Action are grouped into function. Flowcharts are used to organize this function, and flowchart represent the flow of control from one action to another. Little attention is given to data used by function. Okay, so data was the least attention, while we will see in object-oriented programming that data is the primary focus while to write programming using object-oriented, right? So In multi-function program, imported data items are placed as global variable, may be accessed by all function. Each function may have its own local data. Global data is vulnerable to an environment changed by function. If data structure is revised, we need to revise all functions that access the data. So, procedural approach does not model real world problem very well, okay, because emphasis is on action, not on the data, okay. So, further exploration like global data is accessed by these functions, so that data could be vulnerable, okay. So, these all are few characteristics of procedure oriented programming. Here we see that emphasis on doing things, that is on algorithm. Large program are divided into smaller program which is known as a function. Most of the functions share global data. Data move openly around the system from function to function. Function transform data from one form to another, and it implies the top-down approach in programming design. So, here it is divided, a problem is divided into tasks and then divide the task into smaller subtasks and so on. So, this way of doing is procedure oriented programming, okay. Now, in the latest modern approach of doing programming is the object oriented paradigm, okay. So, object oriented programming treat data as a critical element, where in procedure the function procedure was the prime concern, okay. So, this object oriented programming does not allow data to flow freely from around the system. Why? Because data and function are wrapped into the functions data and function are grouped together in the form of class. So, data is called member data and function is called member function. So, only the member function are allowed to access the member data, okay. A function which belong to some other class cannot be allowed to access the data of some different class, okay. That's why the data is not freely flowing, okay, in object oriented programming, while in procedure oriented programming the main drawback or you can say that the limitation of procedure oriented programming was that data could be vulnerable. So, that we overcome in the object oriented programming, because data and functions are wrapped into class, and only the function which belong to that class are allowed to access that data which belong to that particular class. No function of different class can access the data of different class, okay. So, object oriented programming ties data more closely to the function that operate on it and protect it from accidental modification from outside function. So, here problem is decomposed into a number of entity called objects and then builds data and function around these objects, okay. So, in object oriented programming, the consideration is to think about the data, how we can make a class, how many different class could be formed, how the object are going to communicate with each other, that are the main things in the object oriented programming. So, we can see that one object here in this diagram, object communicate with each other, right. So, an object is basically what? Object is basically, it is a variable of type class, okay. Like suppose we write these variable int ABC. So, ABC are what? This is the variable of type integer. Similarly, object is what? Suppose if we create a class, say student, and we say create a variable st1, st2, st3 and so on. So, basically st1, st2 are nothing but these all are also the variable of type class student, okay. So, objects are nothing but objects are variable of type class, okay, and class is a user defined data type like a student, so, like employee, like companies and all that, right. So, In this diagram, we can see that basically there is a communication, there are communication among the object. One object communicate with another object by the use of functions and all, right. So, object has data as well as function, they may communicate to each other, okay. So, the data of an object can be accessed only by the function associated with that object. However, function of one object can access the function of other objects, okay. Function can access, okay, function of one object can access the function of another object, but the data of an object can be accessed only by the function associated with that object only, okay. These are the features. Like already said that in object oriented programming, the emphasis is on data rather than the procedure, okay. Here programs are divided into objects. Data structure characterize the objects. Function which operates on data of an object are tied together in the data structure, okay. Data is hidden, that is the important thing. So, in object oriented programming, data is hidden and cannot be accessed by external function. Objects may communicate with each other through functions, okay. New data and function can be easily added whenever necessary, and this object oriented programming follows the bottom up approach, okay. So, bottom level module develop first, okay. Further we can explore that it is an approach which provides a way of modelizing programs by creating partition memory area for both data and function that can be used as a template for creating copies of such modules on demand, okay. These all are the concepts which are associated with the object oriented programming: object class, data abstraction, encapsulation, inheritance, polymorphism, dynamic binding and message passing. So, we will see, we will explore little by little all these topics, okay. So, objects are nothing but it is the variable of type class, okay, and class is a user defined data type, that is all, okay. So, objects are basic runtime entity, okay, because objects takes memory in object takes memory, not class takes memory, okay. So, when we create object of some type class, then and only memory could be allocated. Suppose if we create class and we did not define an object, we do not we have not declared any object of that class, then there will be no memory allocations, okay. So, objects are a basic runtime entity. An object may represent a person, place, bank account, table, etc. Okay, it may also represent user-defined data such as vector, time, and list. Okay, program objects match closely with the real-world objects. Like here, student is what? Objects. Okay, I mean basically it is a class, and particular student will be the object of that class. Okay. So, here data is name, date of birth, marks, and function is like we are going to perform some operation like total, like average, like display, okay. Class is nothing but class is what? A class is collection of object, okay. So, the entire set of data and code of an object can be made a user defined data type using the class. Objects are nothing but it is a variable of type class. We can create any number of objects belonging to that class. So, a class is thus a collection of object of similar type, okay, like in mango, apple and orange are member of class fruits, okay. Now, data abstraction. So, data abstraction or abstraction basically it is an abstraction is basically an act of representing essential feature without including the background details, okay. So, the wrapping of data and function into a single unit which is called class is known as encapsulation, okay. It is not accessible to outside world, okay. It is wrapped basically. So, the function which are inside into that class, they are only allowed to access that particular data which belong to that class, okay. So, this feature is called data heading or some information heading. So, the function provide the interface between the object's data and the program. Using function we can access, okay, communicate. So, abstraction refer to the act of representing essential feature without including the background details or explanation. A class is defined as a list of abstract attributes such as size, weight and cost, and function operate on these attributes, okay. So, a class basically encapsulates all the essential property of the object that are to be created, like attributes, function, okay, and all. inheritance, the idea of reusability could be implemented using the concept of inheritance. Okay. So it is a process by which objects of one class acquire the property of object of another class. It supports hierarchical classifications like like a person, okay, grandparents, a person has, I mean, father and grandparents, okay, so that relation could be, I mean, represented as a hierarchical form, okay. So each derived class share common characteristics with the class from which is derived. So inheritance basically provides the idea of reusability. A class could be reused without, I mean, creating a new base class could be reused. Okay, so inheritance is nothing but it is the process by which we could, I mean, divide or extend the features of class by creating a new subclass. Sometimes it is called derived class, sometimes it is called subclass, and subclass can inherit the feature of its base class. Okay, that's all. Okay, so like here we can see that a bird could be categorized further into flying bird and non-flying bird, and further like this. Okay. Polymorphism. Polymorphism basically start with polymorphous. Polymorphous means one thing has different meaning depending on the context where it is used. Okay, so it is polymorphism means the ability to take more than one form. Okay, so based on the data type used, an operation may exhibit different behavior in different instances. Okay. So the concept of polymorphism is implemented using the concept of function overloading or operator overloading. So it is the way by which we can implement the concept of polymorphism. So polymorphism is implemented using either by function overloading or by operator overloading. Okay, like I mean, the function overloading means one function gets overloaded. Overloaded means the name of function will be same, but there may difference of, I mean, number of arguments, type of argument, okay, but function name will be the same. So, I mean, okay, so for same function may have different, I mean, behavior depending on the context. So, context is here difference in types of argument or number of argument which that function takes as its parameter. Okay. Okay. So using a single function name to perform different type of task is known as function overloading. Okay. So a single function can be used to handle different number and different types of argument. Okay. It allows object having different internal structure to share the same external interface. Correct. Like here a function just say if we use a function draw, okay, and if we pass the argument like circle, so it will draw the circle. Okay, so the function is the main thing, I mean the main function is shape. Okay, so then draw is a function. Okay, so shape could be circle, shape could have I mean kind of box, and shape could have triangular. Okay, so draw function is the same. Okay, everywhere is draw, but depending on the parameters, suppose if we pass circle, it will draw the circle. If we pass the box, it will draw the box, and if we pass the triangle, okay, then it will draw triangle. Okay, so the different shape could be, I mean, be there using the same function. Okay, so if we change in argument by anyhow, either by different parameter or by types of parameter, if we change, so it may exhibit different behavior. Okay, different behavior, different implementations. Next is binding. Binding means like in operating system, binding means I mean if instruction gets its address, that is called binding. Okay, So binding here means linking a procedure call to the code to be executed in response to the call. Okay. So it means that the code associated with a given procedure call is not known until the time of the call at runtime. Okay. So the code associated with a given procedure is known when it is going to run, not before that. So the address and will be associated at runtime only with that instruction. Okay. So dynamic binding is basically associated with polymorphism and inheritance. Okay. Message passing. Message passing. How could be message pass? Message passing basically it could be done using the concept. Using the function. Okay. So in OOP, set of objects communicate with each other. Objects communicate with one another by sending and receiving information. So a message is basically for an object is a request for execution of a procedure. Message invokes a function procedure in receiving object. Okay. So here message passing involve specifying the name of the object, the name of the function, message and the information to be sent. Okay. Like here employee is an object of type employee. Sally will be the function and this is the message and this is the argument. So argument is basically, function is basically message. Okay. So that could be the, so object, like how the function gets executed, we will see. It is by specifying object name, dot operator, then function name and then the argument which that function takes. Okay. So here the function is basically message and whatever information is passing to that function is called information. Okay. These are the benefit of OOPs. Okay. Through inheritance, we can eliminate redundant code and extend the use of existing classes. We can build programs from the standard working module that communicate with one another rather than having to start writing the code from scratch. So this leads to saving development time and higher productivity. The principle of data hiding helps the programmer to build a secure program that cannot be invaded by the code in other parts of a program. These all are some benefits. Okay, it is more secure. Okay, so data is not more vulnerable. Now it is possible to have multiple instances of an object and to coexist without any interference. Okay. So object oriented, there is object oriented language, like in starting we have said that object oriented could be have object based programming language as well as object oriented programming language. So object programming language, the example of object oriented programming, object based programming language is ADA programming language, and that doesn't support inheritance and dynamic binding. Okay, so in object oriented, and these both features, inheritance and dynamic binding also supports. Okay, so object oriented programming language will have the feature of object based feature plus inheritance plus dynamic binding. Okay, like C++ and Java are object oriented programming based language. Okay, these are the application of object oriented programming, real time system, simulation and modeling, object oriented databases, hypertext, hypermedia and expert text, AI and expert system and all this. Okay, this is a simple program which depicts or which implement the concept of object and class. Okay, here we have created a class person. Name is the data of that class, get data and display are the function of that class. Okay, so if you want to define functions, so this is the syntax, scope resolution, name of the class. For before that we pass the void, okay, and the return get data. This function doesn't return anything, so we could write void before the name of class. Okay, then and only we could define the member function. Okay, so member function could be defined like that way. Okay, we have to write the class, scope resolution and the return type of that function before the class. Okay, so get data is defined and just for getting input, I mean name and age taking input, and this display function simply displaying the name and age. Okay. So here we see, like in main we have created an object P. So once we create the object of say class person, then and only memory is going to allocate in the RAM. Okay. So class name, I mean object name, function name, and there is no I mean information passed in this uh, function. Okay. So when we call I mean the function just by putting the name of object followed by dot, then its definition gets executed. Okay. So get data will be executed once we call that. And how we can call? By creating the object of that class followed by dot and name of the function. So this is the simple implementation of C++ program which shows the class and objects. So that's all about. So here we have discussed the latest modern way of programming paradigm, that is the object-oriented programming. That object-oriented programming include the concept of object, class, function, I mean inheritance, function overloading, operator overloading. Okay, means the concept of polymorphism. Okay, the concept of inheritance and all that. Okay, that's all about. Thank you.